to another edition of Lab 207 webcast. My name is Mr. Kite, and I'm going to be hanging out with you today as we again talk about invasive species. Today's talk is Space Invaders, Freedom from the System. So let's start out by meeting our invader. Just like our last talk, we're going to be talking about invasive fire ants. In this case, the Argentine fire ant, which has taken over much of the American South, Southwest, and California. Before we start talking about our ants, though, we need to talk a little bit about competition. So starting out by defining competition. Competition is a situation where you have one organism using a resource in such a way that it limits that resource for another organism. So basically, I have it and you can't. Broadly speaking, competition can be broken down into two different categories. You've got exploitative competition, which is basically competition where an organism finds a resource, in this case we'll talk about food, calls all of his friends and helpers, they exploit that resource in such a way that other organisms can't get to it. There isn't any fighting or anything like that, it's just one group of organisms gets there first and totally swamps it out. The other type of competition is more traditionally thought of as being competition. This is interference competition, where there is some sort of fight or confrontation between the competing organisms. Now, in our ants that we're talking about today, native ants in California have a trade-off. A trade-off is where you can have one thing or another thing, but not both. In this case, our ants are trading off between either being good exploitative competitors or good interference competitors. The native ants in California can be one or the other, but not both. Generally speaking, researchers found that ants that are big and good at fighting aren't so quick to get to a resource, and ants that are small and not good at fighting are able to get to a resource very quickly. So the ants couldn't be both big and fast or slow and good fighters. They had to be one or the other, unless you're an Argentine fire ant. Research found that Argentine fire ants are the quickest exploiters, so they get to a food source very quickly and totally swamp it so other organisms can't get there, which would make you think that they aren't good fighters, but researchers also found that they are decent fighters. So they won, half or more of the fights that they engaged in with native species they were competing against. So our Argentine fire ants were outside the system of trade-offs where you had to have one or the other. They actually got to have their cake and eat it too. Bad pun, I know. Other things that allow them to be really good invaders is they live in very dense colonies and they're omnivorous. So these three things together, being outside the trade-off system, omnivorous, and dense populators, allows our Argentine fire ants to continue marching across the American landscape. Hope you found this interesting. Thanks for joining us on the Lab Web 207 webcast. Hope we'll see you again.